Dun, 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 dun. Here are 6 houses you should avoid buying at all costs, or potentially
they are going to cost you. We're Joe and Charity with the Live Well Home Group, and every week we're helping people just like you buy and sell homes in Olympia and all over Washington. So if you want to make sure you avoid these types of houses, just continue watching.
the first one is homes that are in a flood zone. Now, in the Puget Sound area, there is a lot of flood zones, not just because of the Puget Sound, but because of lakes and rivers flood, all of those type of things. And you're going to want to be aware of this before you get into contract. Now, it doesn't mean it's always a deal breaker, but it is something to be aware of because you could potentially end up like a situation we found ourselves in personally. In the middle of the night, my wife woke me up in the middle of a storm.
Let me tell the story because
Okay.
it's much better from my perspective. We had just bought this home. It had only been a couple months, and Joe and I were asleep, and about midnight, our oldest son, who's in high school, came and woke me and said, "Mom, there's water in the garage." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, there's water in the garage. Come look." So I went downstairs, opened the garage door, and the garage was completely full, almost coming in the door. So I went to look out the front door, and the water was coming at our house, rushing around our house like a river, and it was this far, and it wouldn't have been in the house. So this is the best part. I told our son to go up and wake up his dad, and me knowing that Joe's a really heavy sleeper and he doesn't quite, he's not with it till he gets coffee. So
yeah, that's true.
he walked down the stairs, still did not know what was going on, opened the garage door, just stepped right out into the garage and stepped right into the water.
And it woke me up then. The water was definitely a
wake-up call.
A wake-up call.
Yeah.
It really was. I didn't need coffee for that day. So be aware of those things. Like we said, with this home, it turned out it wasn't a deal breaker. There's things that you can do to mitigate it, and you definitely want to be aware of that, especially in our area.
Yeah, in fact, there's a couple of cities around Olympia that almost all the houses are in flood zones. So
it's doable.
It's doable.
It's doable, but just know what you're getting into, the extra insurance that you're going to need in those situations, and also have a game plan how to mitigate it.
Yep, exactly. So especially when you're working with a lender and you have a very specific amount that you're in your monthly budget, the flood zone actually could put you out of potentially buying a certain home because they have to add the expense of the flood insurance into it. So a lot of things to be aware of. So avoid flood zones if you can.
The second home you're going to want to avoid potentially at all costs is the ambitious DIYer, because I tell you this much, we walked into so many homes and people love to show us their amazing work that they've done when we're listing it, but when we're walking in with buyers, we see things and it's like, holy snapping arseholes, Margaret, I'm not sure who did that, but they should have wore glasses. And they could go from there for sure.
Because we're seeing houses, hundreds of houses every year, we actually run into quite a few of them, and it's comical. Sometimes I take photos of some of the things that people have done, and sometimes they are very, very expensive to fix because maybe they did their own tile work throughout the whole house.
Yeah.
And it looks bad. And
it looks like you're going to stub your toe every time you walk through the living room.
Yeah. And if you tear that up and put new flooring in, that's more expensive than if you just had to rip carpet out and put new flooring in.
Yeah. The other part that goes into that is things that are unpermitted that should have been permitted. Not every home project needs to be permitted, but there are some that really do. You are going to want to make sure that the projects that needed to be permitted are permitted, or potentially that's going to affect your purchase price on the home. So when looking at a home that has a lot of just homeowner projects, you're going to want to make sure that those projects have been permitted if necessary, and have your agent look into those to make sure that everything that was need to be done, it has been taken care of, it is brought up to code if necessary. Or one of the other parts about that is probably going to affect the purchase price because it's going to be down a little bit because you're going to have to bring potentially things up to code. So be aware of that when you're running across homes that maybe it looks like, I wonder if they did it by themselves. They perhaps did.
And if your agent has been in the market for a while, they will know the difference.
Yeah.
And some agents will know the difference even more. In fact, Joe and I have flipped several houses and we built a house, so we're pretty aware of things that aren't done well and things that aren't done right.
Yeah, I'm pretty much at this stage in my life in awe of really great craftsmen, and there's a lot of them. You know, sometimes in this type of situation, you want to distinguish these because there are homes that have been professionally flipped by companies that do this for a living and do a fantastic job. And really, at those types of situations, you're usually in a great shape to get a wonderful product, a home to live in. Sometimes, though, those are pretty cheaply, and we'd be able to help you with that to make informed decisions about what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah. The next type of home that you want to avoid buying is one that has foundation issues. So
What do we mean by that?
What do we mean by that?
We don't mean that when you walk around the house, you could potentially sense some little cracks in the foundation. That's really pretty common, concrete cracks, and so you'll see those. What you're going to want to avoid is when you start to see cracks big enough that large rats walk through. That's an obvious telltale sign of a foundation issue. Actually, they're probably a little bit smaller than that.
You can put your pinky in it.
If you can put your pinky in it, if they're going in different directions, if you see where there's a lot of water erosion around the foundation and the cracks, there's things that'll tip you off. And of course, during the home inspection time frame, you're going to be able to examine those and get a professional opinion on it. But be aware with foundation, it's because it is very expensive potentially to get repairs done. Doesn't mean they can't be done. It just means that potentially it's going to be very expensive to bring them up to speed where you're going to want to be for the longevity of your home.
Right. And it does matter what kind of a lot situation is that the house is on. There's a house that was for sale for quite a long time, actually pretty close to our house, and it had a slope off the back of the house, and that house had significant cracks in the foundation, and it wasn't just because of settling, it was because the ground was uneven and it was actually dropping more into the ravine behind it. And so that's the reason it's on the market for a very, very long time, because nobody was willing to take on that, and that was going to be really severe expense to somebody's pocketbook.
Yeah, so be aware of those. Things can be fixed, but normally you have to add dollar signs to it. Matter of fact, a good friend of mine's a general contractor, and they actually had to stabilize an entire home that had built on a riverbed, and it cost well over $250,000 to get that thing stabilized. So ouchie, and also need to be aware.
Yeah.
The next home that you're going to want to avoid at all costs is those on the busy road. When you're hearing all the truckers down there and the Jake brakes, if that's for you, no worries. If that's not for you, worry a lot. Best way to tell this is when you get in the home, if it is on a busy road or backing up to the freeway, when you close all those windows, does it go quiet? And if it does, hey, they've really done good sound deadening, those type of things to make sure that you can enjoy it. But if not, it's one of those things you want to consider, because the next buyer might not be as gracious towards purchasing the home as you might be.
Yeah, that's the biggest deal. You might be okay living with it, but the buyer pool goes down significantly when you're on a busy road. Backing up too, like Joe was saying, backing up to a freeway or a busy road because of the noise, but actually being like the front side of your house on a busy road is very difficult to sell. Another reason why people may not want to buy a home on a busy road besides the sound is because of safety, especially people with little kids. They're not going to want to be on a busy road where their kids are in danger. So consider all of these things before you consider a house on a busy road.
That leads us to the next one that you need to potentially avoid, and that is home on leased land. Now, depending on where you're coming from, this might not be anything you've even heard of. And quite frankly, I had only heard of it in rare situations, but we do find that a lot in our area. There are certain areas specifically around a couple lakes that are predominantly only leased land. Now that doesn't mean it's a deal breaker, but you do need to know how those contracts need to be structured and what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, so a little bit more about what that is. This land in particular that we're referring to is owned by a power company, and it's around a lake, and almost every house is on leased land. I think there's between 45 and 60 years left on the 100-year lease that was originally there, and there has not been a decision as to what will happen when the lease ends. So you buy your house, but the land that your house is on is not your own land. So when that lease expires, you are subject to whatever happens when it ends. And everybody is hoping that they just set it back up for another 100-year lease, but nobody knows what's going to happen. And as that amount of time starts to dwindle, the less your house is going to be worth if those things haven't been decided, because people are going to wonder, is this house actually going to be mine when the lease ends? So super important to consider. Also, if you're considering buying something, you don't have anybody to leave it to. So for instance, if you're in your 60s and you're retiring and you don't have anybody to leave the property to, and there's 40 years left on it, well, obviously you're going to be in good shape. You can live there the rest of the years and not worry about it. And most people do have plans for a home after they have lived there themselves. So big one to consider.
Absolutely. The next house you're going to want to avoid potentially at all costs is
It's electric.
Houses with electrical problems. Really, it comes down to the panel, how old the home is, whether it has knob and tube, whether it's been upgraded or not. this could be a major safety concern, and some panels have had some major problems as safety concerns. So you're going to be aware of that. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about knob and tube. What's really cool about that is when I was a kid, I remember going down into the furnace area and have to screw them in when things would pop in my grandma's house, which was awesome because they sent the little kid downstairs scared to death with the flashlight saying, hey, fix that.
Go work on the electrical.
Go work on electrical panel at 8. So it's a little bit about my childhood. Apparently I'm here. Who knows if therapy was needed? Hard to say.
So avoiding knob and tube, or at
Making
least
sure it's been updated.
Right, or having a concession for having to have that done because that's an expense. So the price of the house should compensate you for the expense of having updated electrical. The other thing that you need to be really cautious of are those panels that Joe was referring to. And there's two that are really well known, Federal Pacific and also Zinsco, but there's also a whole list of them and you can Google them. But basically the materials that they were made out of don't last as long as they have been in houses, and so things start to break down, melt. Breakers may not trip when needed and could cause electrical fires. In fact, with the Federal Pacific panel, up to 2,800 fires happen a year and up to $40 million in damages. So that also brings up another problem. Most insurance companies will not insure a house with one of those panels. So if you find one during an inspection, you definitely need to negotiate for the seller to take care of that. And they may think, it's been working for me all these years, why would I just pay for you to have it done? Because the issues that are in there are often hidden and you can't see them until the fire happens. So good reason.
Good reason.
Another type of home that you are probably going to want to avoid is one that still has galvanized piping. Like we said with the electrical issues, it doesn't mean it's over. Just make sure the price compensates for that. You will need to do something in the future.
The reason we're bringing up galvanized pipe is it doesn't mean it's a deal breaker. You just make sure you have the right person come in, a good plumber that has done it before, to give you an estimate of what it's going to cost in the negotiation time frame. I had a couple clients of mine who decided to back away because of galvanized pipe because their home inspector scared them out of it, which was very unfortunate because the seller was very willing to make the modifications needed and have the sale go through, but they got so scared, and they got scared because they didn't listen to the right person. An inspector is different than a professional plumber, and you're going to want to make sure that the professional plumber is giving you the estimate of what the project would cost and how it would be handled. So just want to let you know of that, because it's not always things that make you want to walk away. You just need to be aware of what you're getting yourself into. The primary problem that you'll find with galvanized pipe is as they age, they begin to rust and then they begin to leak at joints. That is really the primary thing. So if it has a lifespan of about 50 years, which 50 to 60 years is what it usually has as a lifespan, once you start reaching the end of that, you will want to start to be aware of any potential leaks at joints under the house or back behind walls or wherever it might be. The next home that you're going to want to consider to avoid at all costs is the highly customized home. Somebody's personal preference will run amok.
Yes. Customize is usually a word that's put in a listing to sound fancy and amazing and like a lot of money has been spent on it. But usually customized means somebody did something that nobody else is going to like.
Which is fine if you're the homeowner, make it your home. Just also realize when it goes to sell it, it might not have the same pool of people that want to buy with your same preferences. So very much be aware of that. I think the most interesting one to me is when I see something where they've done a bathroom remodel and somehow the toilet needs to be very high in the room. And I've seen this on 2 different homes where you have several steps up to the toilet, a throne. And I don't know what all that's about, but that is a personal preference that perhaps not everybody else wants to climb up to go to the restroom. Just throwing it out there.
I actually took a tour of a home in a really nice HOA style neighborhood. The outside of the house, you couldn't tell a difference from one house to another. It was great. But once we walked in, it was like we were in a Greek palace or something. There were murals painted on all of the walls. It looked like you had, like the whole thing on the inside was built out of giant tiles. And there were pillars painted in, and it was a 2-story vaulted. It was really grand if you really wanted to feel like you were in a great temple. But I don't think most buyers want to feel like you're in a great temple.
It's really like waking up in Vegas every day. Because Vegas isn't the real thing, like this condensed version, and then now you're even more condensed version. So, hey, if that's your jam, there's no judgment here.
Just hire a painter.
But it should go away before the next buyer comes in.
So if all this information was helpful and you'd like to find a home that you don't want to avoid, then we'd love to help help you, you can go ahead and get in touch with us on the number below. And if you like this video, go ahead and like and subscribe and keep watching.